Well, guys, this is it. Oh, wait a minute, wait a minute. Good evening, or good afternoon, or good morning, my lovely students. This is it. This is the last presentation for this semester. Some of you might be thrilled. Some might be a little sad, a little nostalgic. But I'll have many of you next semester, so you get to hear more of my cheesy presentations. But this is it for this semester. This is the WWI Epic Conclusion. And we just have like a week and a half left of instruction, and then we got to start getting ready for the final. And so we need to wrap this thing up. We need to figure out what happened. And if you don't remember, World War I was this massive stalemate where no one could get an advantage and everybody was getting really frustrated. So the last part of World War I, we're going to have this breakthrough, and it's going to be a tremendous time of activity. So here we go. Let's talk about 1917 and the German gamble, baby. I mean, they put it all on the table. They had a plan. Remember early in the year they had the Schlieffen plan, where they were going to try to defeat France quickly by running the option play and going through Belgium, and that didn't work because the defensive positions were virtually invulnerable. So it's been a 3-year stalemate, and everybody is getting wore out. I mean, everybody is losing their will to fight. So Germany comes up with this idea to try to win the war that almost worked. And it revolves around this concept, the freedom of the seas. Now, one thing that has been a long-standing international principle is once you get about 10 miles away from the shoreline, you're in international waters, and everyone on Earth has the right to be in international waters. Your enemies have the right to be within international water, in international waters. You know, if you come within 10 miles of the shore, then all of a sudden you're in American water. But China can put its warships 12 miles out to sea, and they're in international waters. So the United States was not a combatant for the first few years of the war. And we sent a lot of supplies to the United Kingdom, who we felt this great friendship towards. Now, Germany looks at this and says this is a war of attrition. We're trying to wear each other out. What we need to do is we need to cut this supply line. And the way you cut this supply line is you start sinking ships that are supplying the British. So we're going to disregard this concept of the freedom of the seas and this one last push to try to win the war. Now understand, here's Germany. They're pretty isolated. Here's the United Kingdom right here in France. So American ships were coming across the Atlantic Ocean and bringing supplies to France and Britain. Now the British Navy is much better than the German Navy, but the Germans had something in mass quantities. They had submarines. So going back, a submarine could come out of Germany underwater and come out here in the Atlantic Ocean and bam, sink a U.S. ship. And before this, the Germans were reluctant to do this, but they realized by using these subs and doing this policy of unrestricted submarine warfare, it was going to probably bring the United States into the war. Their theory was, their hope was, their gamble was that they could defeat France and Britain before the Americans could have a great impact. Pure and simple gamble. It's like 4th and 1 in sports. You're going to go for it. If you don't make it, then the other team gets the ball. It's a gamble. It's a gamble. I think it would have been like to be in a submarine in World War I. Jeez, I just couldn't imagine. I can't even imagine being in a submarine now, let alone a submarine in World War I. Think how cold and dark and miserable that was. My gosh. Not to mention claustrophobic. So what we have here is the Germans are doing a race against time. They know this obnoxious act on their part is probably going to bring the Americans in the war. Their hope is that they can sweep through the French forces and British forces because they will lose their American supplies. If they lose their American supplies, then Germany can defeat them and it'll all be over before America can have a great impact. That's the German gamble. Now, in conjunction with this German strategy, the Germans had another wonderful piece of luck. Let's go back here for a second. Germany was really worried about Russia, and they had to fight on two different fronts, but the Russians were pretty ineffective at attacking, and so there were a lot of German and Russian soldiers bogged down in heavy fighting, but it really wasn't going anywhere either. So what the Germans hoped was, if they could maybe get rid of Russia as an enemy, they could take all their forces and concentrate here in France and win this battle. And they got a massive piece of luck in 1917 when Russia just happened to have a revolution. Now we're going to learn all about this Russian Revolution in the next couple of days, but just for now, understand that this is a revolution that was different than most. It has a lot of similarities to the French Revolution, which we studied earlier, and we'll talk about those similarities. But this is the Bolshevik Revolution. And does anybody know what Bolshevik means? I'll give you a second. You got it. It means communist. Now, you see like the great fathers of communism here. Friedrich Engels, a philosopher. Karl Marx, another philosopher. Most people associate communism with him more than anybody. And then the leader of the Russian Revolution is a guy by the name of Vladimir Lenin, who we're going to talk about later in the week. So this revolution takes place and effectively takes Russia out of the war. So Germany doesn't have to worry about its Eastern Front. It can concentrate all its energies against France and Britain. And hopefully the Americans won't get there in time. Okay, 1917 works its way into 1918. All of Germany is focused right here in northeastern France on the Western Front. If they can break through this front and capture Paris, they'll win the war. But American soldiers, this is one of the keys, are coming in mass quantities. Now, one thing that's kind of interesting to say is the Americans played a really crucial role in the last months of the war. The Germans were not able to carry off their gamble. And to a large extent, the infusion of American soldiers was just what Britain and France needed to stem the German tide. So the United States deserves a lot of credit in the final climatic battles of World War I. What made the British and French a little mad was they had been fighting for 4 years. Here the Americans come and just really effectively get involved in a little over the last year in the climatic battles. They didn't feel like the United States should have as much say in what took place after the war as the United States did. And this becomes a huge issue in the peace conference that took place in Paris in the year 1919. Now, we are going to learn all about this peace conference next week. I'm just going to give you the bare bones right now. Here's the American president. His name is Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson was a visionary. He was someone who really understood a lot. He didn't want to get the United States involved in World War I. He reluctantly went along with American entry. And the whole thing horrified him. He was a pacifist. He believed that people should never resort to military force. And so his big thing, quite intuitively, is he thinks if we go out and we punish Germany harshly, it's going to mean that we're going to be fighting another war in a generation. Boy, was he right about this. But he was idealistic about some other things, but he did understand this point. So his big thing is, don't punish Germany. A peace among equals was his big line. Now, Britain and France, on the other hand, they've been fighting for 4 years, and their idea was, we need to punish these guys. We need to make them pay the price for this war, for this conflict that they started. So Germany needs to be punished. They need to feel the pain, baby. And they had some very specific things that they wanted. Number one, they wanted reparations. Another word for reparations is payment. They wanted Germany to pay for all the damages that took place in World War I. They lost, they got to pay. They wanted Germany to assume responsibility for starting the conflict. Now, when you go back to the 4 main causes of World War I, this was ridiculous. I mean, almost all the countries share in the guilt of starting World War I. Now, granted, Germany did attack Belgium. I get that. But you have to understand that really all the European nations were responsible. Germany is going to get much, much, much smaller as a result of World War I. They're going to lose a lot of valuable territory. Again, they lost, they lose territory. And finally, there's going to be a dramatic reduction in the size of the German military. Now, all these things, go back through these. I mean, these are pretty harsh. They're going to have to pay, they're going to have to accept responsibility, they're going to lose land, and they're going to lose their ability to defend themselves. There was one young corporal by the name of Adolf Hitler that thought that these conditions were grossly unfair. And he's not going to be alone in Germany. So Woodrow Wilson was right in that sentiment to a large extent. Now the compromise, I'm going to explain the compromise right now, but first I want to show you this picture. I love it. This is a picture from an American magazine from 1922. Right here you see Germany, and Germany is being attacked by France and Britain and Italy, and the United States is kind of sitting by watching. And the German guy is saying, hey, mister, could you spare a minute to come in and do a bit of refereeing? In other words, it seems like Germany's getting ganged up on here. So, and the Americans are kind of standing by watching. So here was the compromise. The compromise means both sides give a little bit. The United States is willing to go along with harsh treatment of Germany for Woodrow Wilson's dream, the League of Nations, which we're going to learn about next week. It's an international organization that's like the United Nations today, whose job it was to maintain peace through collective security. You'll learn about it next week. So in other words, Woodrow Wilson is willing to give up all of those other things if we can just have this organization that he thinks is going to prevent future war. Didn't work. All right, people, that's it for this semester.